In the final 60 seconds of Flight 908, every alarm in the cockpit was screaming. Red lights flashed across the control panels, warning tones pulsed through the cramped flight deck, and the aircraft, once gliding smoothly through the cold evening sky, began to tremble as if fighting against an invisible force. Outside the windows, the world was nothing but darkness. Somewhere far below, lights from small towns were scattered like forgotten stars. But up here, inside this metal tube diving toward the ground, time was running out. What none of the passengers knew was that the disaster had already been set in motion long before anyone even boarded the plane. It had started as a routine day. Flight 908, a mid-range twin-engine airliner operated by Atlantic Skyways, was scheduled to fly from Seattle to Denver. A simple, familiar route. For the crew, it was nothing more than another shift. Captain Daniel Reeves, a veteran pilot with over 24 years of experience, liked to joke that he could fly this route with his eyes closed, though of course he never would. His first officer for the day, Emily Carter, was young, precise, and fiercely disciplined. She had a reputation for knowing every checklist by heart and a talent for catching even the tiniest mistake. On paper, they made the perfect team. The aircraft assigned to their flight, a Model A320R, had completed its per-flight checks with no reported issues. The weather chart showed a few patches of turbulence along the route, but nothing severe. There were no storms, no icing warnings, no unusual jet streams. Everything pointed to a smooth, uneventful flight. Even the passengers boarding the plane that evening looked relaxed, many of them carrying snacks or wearing headphones. Business travelers, families going home, a few students returning to Colorado, all completely unaware that every second they spent on that plane was part of a countdown that no one could see. Once the engines roared to life and the plane lifted from the runway, Flight 908 climbed steadily toward cruising altitude. The seatbelt signs switched off with a soft chime, and the cabin filled with the usual sounds of in-flight life, the soft hum of engines, the rustle of magazines, the murmur of conversation. In the cockpit, Captain Reeves and First Officer Carter settled into their routine. Reeves adjusted the autopilot settings while Carter radioed air traffic control, confirming their altitude and heading. Everything was functioning as expected. Yet somewhere deep inside the aircraft's electrical systems, a problem was quietly taking shape, one that would remain invisible until it was far too late. About an hour into the flight, clouds began to thicken. The air grew rougher. Passengers felt the first hints of turbulence, just small bumps, nothing alarming. The captain made a brief announcement, reassuring everyone that they would be passing through some disturbed air for a few minutes. But in the cockpit, Carter noticed something strange. One of the readings on the primary flight display flickered for a moment. A small, almost imperceptible glitch. She tapped the screen lightly, and it stabilized. "Probably just a loose connector," Reeves said, barely concerned. "This old bird does that sometimes." Carter nodded but made a mental note. Any irregularity, no matter how small, was worth watching. 10 minutes later, the turbulence grew stronger. The clouds thickened into towering formations that the radar painted in bright red. Reeves consulted the weather radar again, trying to find a path around the worst of it. The turbulence wasn't dangerous yet, but it was noticeably rough. Drinks rattled on tray tables, overhead compartments creaked. A baby cried somewhere in the back. The pilots requested a slight deviation to avoid the storm cell, and air traffic control approved it. The plane banked gently to the left. Everything seemed under control, that is, until Carter noticed something else. The airspeed indicator began fluctuating up and down, just a little at first, then more dramatically. She frowned. "Captain, look at this, airspeed jumping again." Reeves leaned forward, squinting at the instrument. "That's not right, check the backup." They looked at the secondary airspeed indicator. It showed a different speed entirely. In aviation, conflicting airspeed data is one of the most dangerous situations a crew can face. Every command, climb, descend, turn, depends on accurate speed information. If the plane is moving faster or slower than the instruments indicate, disaster can unfold in seconds. Carter's training kicked in immediately. "We need to cross-check with the pitot heat. Maybe ice buildup." Reeves shook his head. Temperature's not right for icing at this altitude, but something's definitely off. He reached for the controls, considering disengaging the autopilot. The turbulence intensified sharply at that moment. The aircraft jolted, sending several passengers gripping their armrests. A few startled cries filled the cabin. In the cockpit, alarms began chiming one after another. "Autopilot disconnect," Carter announced. The mechanical chime echoed across the flight deck. Reeves grabbed the control column instantly. Without the autopilot, he needed to stabilize the aircraft manually. But with the airspeed indicators disagreeing, he couldn't tell if he was flying too slow, at the point of stalling, or too fast, risking structural damage. "Which one do we trust?" Carter said, her voice tight. "We trust attitude," Reeves said, forcing calm into his tone. "Pitch and power, standard procedure." He adjusted the throttle and maintained a safe pitch angle, relying on instinct and years of experience. The aircraft steadied slightly, but the turbulence continued shaking everything. Then another alarm blared, this one harsher, more urgent. The primary flight computer displayed a bright message, "Flight control fault." A cascade of error messages followed, each one disabling a different part of the automated system. Something was causing the aircraft's electrical systems to malfunction, one after another. "What is going on?" Carter muttered, scanning the warning panel. Before Reeves could answer, the plane suddenly pitched downward. Just a few degrees at first, then more violently. Passengers screamed as the nose dipped. Loose items slid toward the front of the cabin. In the cockpit, Reeves fought the controls, pulling back with both hands. "Controls sluggish," he said through gritted teeth. "Feels heavy." "I'm seeing multiple actuator warnings," Carter said, her eyes darting across the displays. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Hydraulics were the muscles of the airplane. Without them, the control surfaces couldn't move properly. If they failed completely, the aircraft would become nearly impossible to control. The turbulence continued tossing the aircraft around as the system failures multiplied. Reeves and Carter were now battling both the storm outside and the electrical failures inside. The airspeed indicators had become useless, and the flight computers were shutting down one by one. "We need to declare an emergency," Carter said, grabbing the radio. "Mayday, mayday, mayday, Atlantic Skyways Flight 908. Experiencing multiple system failures, unreliable airspeed, requesting immediate vectors to nearest airport." Air traffic control responded, but their voice crackled, a sign that the plane's communication systems were failing. "Flight 908, say your altitude." Carter looked at the altimeter. "Captain, I see it," Reeves said. The altitude reading was falling rapidly. Whether this was due to a genuine descent or another malfunction, they couldn't be sure. Reeves pulled back further on the controls. The aircraft resisted like a stubborn animal. Another warning erupted. "Stall." A loud, hollow horn pulsed through the cockpit. "That can't be right," Reeves shouted. "We're not pitched that high." But neither pilot could trust any instrument now. One set showed that the plane was stalling. The other showed an overspeed condition. Both scenarios meant death if they chose incorrectly. Carter's breathing quickened. "We need to level the wings, maintain attitude, ignore the airspeed for now." Reeves stabilized the wings as best he could. But the plane continued sinking. Down in the cabin, oxygen masks dropped. Passengers panicked. The aircraft shuddered violently, dropping several hundred feet in a single jolt. Luggage burst from overhead bins. Back in the cockpit, the pilots were losing the battle. A violent jolt threw both of them forward. The plane rolled slightly to the right. Reeves corrected with a left input, but the aircraft didn't respond. The roll increased, right aileron not responding. Switching to alternate controls, Reeves said, but the damage was worse than they thought. The hydraulic system was failing faster than the backups could compensate. The aircraft rolled further. People screamed as the floor tilted. "We're losing lateral control," Carter said. The altimeter continued spinning downward. Reeves made a final, desperate adjustment, but the plane fought back. Its nose dipped sharply. Alarms layered over each other. Then came the final blow, a complete failure of the primary hydraulic system. A loud metallic groan pulsed through the aircraft. Control surfaces froze. The plane was no longer flying, it was falling. "We've lost it," Carter whispered. "Not yet." Reeves said, still fighting. The ground proximity alarm erupted. "Terrain, pull up." The clouds broke for a moment, revealing the Colorado foothills rising fast. Carter radioed one final mayday, but the message cut into static. Reeves locked eyes with her. They both knew. Still, they fought until the final second. In the cabin, passengers braced, prayed, held hands. The plane shuddered violently as the descent steepened. "Brace," Reeves yelled. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The aircraft slammed into the ground in a remote forest, breaking apart instantly. Silence followed. Investigators later traced the cause to a frayed wire deep inside the aircraft. A slow-building electrical fault had cascaded through the systems until nothing remained. The pilot's actions diverted the plane away from populated areas, preventing further loss of life. But for those on board Flight 908, the final minutes were a terrifying descent. A reminder that even the safest machines can fail, and even the best pilots cannot always overcome the impossible.